Jesse.
Anthony.
We're back. And
we
are back with the Journey NYC podcast.
That is right. Here we are.
I'm Anthony.
I'm Jesse.
And we are here today talking to Tracy Cuva.
Hi, everybody.
Episode 5. Excellent. Family of 5. You're episode 5. We're going to keep it consistent.
I like that.
How's it going, Tracy? I haven't seen you in forever.
I think the last time was we saw Black Panther, and we didn't notice date at the end of the movie.
That is true. And then we learned afterwards that there was actually something that they do after.
Yeah. We're like, why are these people still sitting here? Like, let's go.
I know. It's like, let's beat the rush. So we've known each other now for many years, actually, or known of each other.
Yes.
We actually got close in a long distance relationship while I was living in London and
Yes.
you were here.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about, you. What have you been up to? Tell us a little bit about you.
My identity, and I think a lot of what we are going to talk about today on the podcast has evolved a lot.
Cool.
And I was always somebody who worked really hard. I was a senior director in a major fitness company, which is how we knew each other.
Yep.
I was a mom. I had a baby, and then was still on my BlackBerry while I was in labor. And
Dating ourselves a little bit.
My husband, it was a BlackBerry,
right?
Which my husband took away when he found it. And I had a second baby and came back. I had a third baby and actually got deposed while I was on maternity leave.
What?
It came back.
Wow.
For a class action lawsuit, which went the right way.
Yeah.
I was senior director, mommy, wife. And I would say that things were good. And then life had other plans for me.
And it's interesting because Jesse and I always talk about how life is really this. And again, it's how the podcast came about. This was all Jesse's, brainchild as far as talking to real people about real shit. And we talk to people about how life sometimes has little, hiccups and bumps and sometimes large speed bumps. And we always know that these speed bumps have a way of impacting our lives. And I think for any human being, our goal is always to find out, what actually drives a person to become committed to staying open enough to live the journey and progress through these trials and tribulations.
I think a lot of what the last 3 years has been for me. Basically what happened was I had a third baby and I felt off, but I had 3 children.
Sure.
They were 4, 2, and 5 months. I was tired a lot. And I had some postpartum bleeding that just wasn't going away. And I called my doctor about it and they said, you might have to go to a specialist. And I didn't really want to. And I had 3 small children and I had gone back to work and whatever, I wasn't doing a lot. And, about 5.5 months after I had my son, I finally got real about it. I scheduled a doctor's appointment. And then a good part of our support system, our nanny, gave notice. And I was just devastated for my children because this had been a consistent person for them. And I wound up calling my friend Chelsea and I literally hid in our coat closet because I didn't want my kids to see me crying. And I'm like, what's going on? And I don't know what to do. And I'm like, everything feels like it's breaking right now. Everything feels like it's breaking. And 2016 was a crazy year in America, and who knew it was going to get crazier. But there were so many mass shootings, and the that truck had just gone down the rue in France.
Yes.
Yeah. And that Pulse nightclub had just happened, and that little boy getting eaten by an alligator at Disney World, the happiest place on earth, and
was that the same year as the Times Square too? Wasn't there somebody that drove through Times Square?
I believe it happened after,
right.
but
it's like a lot of craziness.
Crazy. A good friend of our family's, her babies. She was 38 weeks pregnant, and the babies was strangled by the umbilical cord.
Oh my
she
God.
lost it at 38 weeks.
Wow.
And it felt like the world was going crazy, and I had this horrible feeling all the time. And I remember being on the phone with her and saying, it's all going crazy. The world, it feels like a hurricane, and it feels like it's going to hit us. And 6 days later, I had my doctor's appointment, and 2 days after that, I got a call saying that I had a rare form of cancer called mucosal melanoma.
Wow.
And I think back to that conversation, I knew something was wrong. I
Yeah.
knew something was coming. I just didn't know what it was. And never in a million years would I have thought that was what was happening.
It's interesting because there's a lot of people that talk a lot about intuition and your gut feeling. And it's like when you know something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Something is not right. Something is not going well. What's going on?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say, like, I knew something wasn't right, whether it be physical or just at your gut, like, or paying attention to what's going on in the world. Yeah. So you get this diagnosis of cancer. Where were you when you get this phone call?
I was literally sitting at my desk. I had just gone to pick up a salad.
Okay.
I'm sitting at my desk. I have one of the few offices on my floor. So I'm one of the few people who could close my door, thank goodness. And I get a call from the doctor. And he goes, hi, how are you?
Uh-oh.
And I said, I'm good. And he goes, so that growth, it wasn't what we thought it was. It's melanoma. Oh, and I start asking him a lot of questions. Well, what stage is it at? What's going on? What does this mean? And he goes, well, yeah, I've put you in, I've reached out to somebody at this hospital, and I want you to see them and you know, reach out to them as well. But you know, they're going to have to answer a lot of these questions for you. And then he goes, do you want to talk about this face to face? You want to come to my office? And I go, is it going to change what you just said to me? And he said, no. And I go, no, I'm good. And I just sat there, and I walked over and I closed my door. And I just stared at my computer for a minute or so. And I called my husband, and I have no idea what I said to him.
Okay.
I have no idea what I said to him. And he has no idea what he said back.
Yeah.
And we hung up. And he called me right back, and he goes, I didn't handle that right. And I said, I don't think there's a good way to handle this. And I had started this thing at my work where I did this mommy lunch like once a month.
Yeah.
And you know, I wound up being very friendly. You would think that people would talk about business, but we actually talked about kids and we didn't talk about business, but it built relationships that are important, again, to how you get stuff done, is knowing that you have a friend in that department and you can call them and say, listen, I know this isn't you. How do I fix this problem? And they can help you, and they can give you some of the behind the scenes. And so I had 4 people who were mommy lunchers, and I called the first one. She didn't answer. Called the second one. She didn't answer. I called another friend who was at another office, actually. And I called her and I said, I need you. That's all I said. She goes, are you at your office? I said, yes. She goes, okay, I'm getting in a cab. And it was enough panic in there that she heard it. And then I called another friend who was upstairs, and she didn't pick up the phone. And I called the person in the office next to her, and I said, is Cheryl there? And she said, yeah, she's in a staff meeting. I go, pull her out. And she came down, and she and my friend Alyssa met at the bottom of the staircase, and they're like, what's going on? I don't know. Do you know what's going on? And they came in, and I told them the whole story. I told them how I'd been bleeding. I told them how I just thought it was postpartum. I gave them the whole story. And Cheryl goes, and we sat there for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and Cheryl goes, you need to go home. And I said, no, I have to send out the 3-day final notice list. Yeah. It's really labor intensive, and I have to send this out. And she goes, it'll get out. Don't worry about it. And she put me in an Uber, and that poor Uber driver had to listen to me calling my support system. Sure. And he was crying by the time he dropped me off. I called the midwife who was part of our OBGYN, a practice, and also a friend, because if you do a hat trick in Manhattan, they'll give you their personal numbers. And she said, do not Google this. Whatever you do, don't Google this, which was great advice. And I spoke to other friends, and I got out of the car, and we weren't telling anybody right away. Sure. And I called my boss, and I did tell him what was going on. And I said, I think I might need tomorrow off just to kind of process this. He said, you should take tomorrow off. And I called a friend of mine who's actually a really well-known HIV specialist. And he's a professor at UCLA. He's done a TED Talk about PrEP. I mean, he's very well known. And I said, what do you know about melanoma? I think I direct messaged him. And he said, enough for it to scare the shit out of me. Who do you know who has it? And I wrote back, me. And he just texted me his number, or he DM'd me his number. He said, call me right now. I'm at my office. And I called him, and I said, okay, well, this hospital isn't going to see me for 3 weeks. And he goes, And he goes, send me the pathology.
Yeah.
And I sent it to him. He goes, I don't know enough about cancer to know all of this, but I don't like the size of this tumor.
Sure.
Let me make some phone calls and I'll call you back. If you can't get into another hospital at Memorial Sloan Kettering, I will get you on a train and I will get you up to where I went to medical school.
Cool.
And I wound up getting into MSK by the following Tuesday. And, it was, I called up and I said, I want to take an appointment with Dr. Postow. And they're like, we don't do that. You don't get to choose who you see.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you see a surgeon first. And so I saw the surgeon, and the surgeon was so nice and so pleasant and clearly so worried for me. And he basically is like, hey, can you stick around, maybe get a CT and an MRI and see this guy, Dr. Postow? And I'm like, that's who I wanted to see. And, not realizing if you're seeing an oncologist versus a surgeon, it's really bad. That means they think that you've metastasized, or that it's going to be a much worse conversation.
Wow.
So we've had 4 different guests that have been diagnosed with different, diseases or conditions.
Yeah.
And each story is the doctor kind of casually placing a phone call and like dropping this bomb. And then like the next part of the story is like, I was just completely freaked out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what it meant. Like, I guess this is going off on a little bit of a tangent. 2 questions and maybe you may not know, but like, is that just the common way that our medical profession gives this kind of, do any doctors bother to say like, why don't you come on down? Like, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it for a sec.
Well, they're scientists at the end of the day. And I would say at Memorial Sloan Kettering, they're better than I would say anybody else at really communicating with you, but they're fact finding. And when they first see you, they don't know the answer. At that point, they just had a biopsy and they knew the original tumor that was taken off was more than an inch long. And I was ignorant. I did not understand a lot about cancer at that point. Sure. I didn't understand that basically anything over a millimeter with melanoma is a bad sign. And this was 2.7 centimeters. So I was already in a dangerous place. But I didn't know that. And I'm so thankful I didn't know that because, the real fear hits when you start understanding. But I think that they have to fact find. And I think, I appreciated his urgency in that he wanted to get a lot of stuff done. And truly, I felt I was talking to a human. And his physician's assistant, God bless her, had to come in and ask me all of these questions. And I said, have you recently gained or lost a lot of weight? Well, I just had a baby.
Right.
Have you recently experienced disruptions to your sleep? Well, I just had a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you experienced any bleeding? Well, I just had a baby. And like she had to keep going through the survey. And by the end, like her voice was cracking. Yeah. Because it was breaking her heart as much as it was scaring me. Right. And I think doctors are scientists, and even with amazing communication, they're trained not to say anything until they know. Right. And
it's also interesting because as human beings, which, a lot of doctors are parents and they're human beings at their core. Of course. And we have this in some respects, is we learn how to shut off a certain portion just to keep distance, because all of that emotion in that would literally probably just overwhelm someone.
Oh, absolutely. And what I did with every single doctor is take a picture of my 3 kids taken shortly after my son was born, like his newborn picture. I think he was like 11 days old with my other 2 kids on either side of him. And I said, these are my kids. Whatever you have to do to make me better, you need to do, because these are my kids.
Nice.
And, I that made an impact later. Sure. It made an impact at the time, but it made an impact that I found out about later. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you get this diagnosis, you're in your office. I
brought the salad home with me too.
Wow. Now that sounds like the detailed-oriented woman that I've always known. So you get this. You actually have thank God that you actually have this support network that you can call, and people understand there are code words. I need you.
Yeah.
There's
there was no code there. It was it was very primal.
Yeah. And it was interesting because I have a girlfriend that lives in Chicago, and I was working in Saudi Arabia, and she has this thing. 11 hours apart, she leaves me this one message, and I'm like frantically trying to get back. I'm like, all right, this is I have to call her back. It's 3 a.m. and I'm trying to get in touch with her. Anyway, so you have this support network, which is great. You take the day off, you go through this. Now you have this diagnosis. It sounds like your husband was pretty remarkable as well, in the respect that he's to even have the cognitive ability to say I didn't handle that well is so impressive to me, because I think the shock alone is just it's debilitating in some respects. So you now have this diagnosis. What happened? I don't know much about like treatment for cancers or even melanoma, etc.
Right. Well, this is a super rare form of melanoma. Melanoma is actually one of the most common cancers that you will get in a lifetime. But most of the time, because it's a spot on the outside of your body, somebody will see it, realize what it is, cut it out, and you're done.
Okay.
Maybe you might have to go through some additional treatments. But for the most part, again, melanoma, when caught early, which early detection is key, is pretty easy to treat. Unfortunately, it likes to hide in a lot of places. And with mucosal melanoma should only be on the outside of your skin, because that's where your melanocytes are. Melanoma is cancer of your melanocytes, which are the things that create pigment in your skin.
Okay.
There is mucosal melanoma, which is like the inside of your body, like the inside of your cheek or in your sinuses or in your reproductive organs. All of those places are places where melanoma can hide.
I did not know that.
With mucosal melanoma. And again, this is one of those things, like 750 to 1,000 people a year get diagnosed with this. It's just super rare.
Rare. Okay.
And again, because I was pregnant, it was easy for it to hide. So the first thing that doctors have to do is figure out what stage you're at.
Sure.
And they have to do a lot of testing for that. And the first conversation post MRI and CT was, okay, it's in your liver and your lungs. We have to now check to see if it's in your brain. And what I did not understand, again, at the time, and I now understand, is there are 3 organs, at least with melanoma, that put you directly at stage 4.
Okay.
And it's your liver, your lungs, your brain. And so, again, I didn't understand that at the time. Thank God I didn't understand that at the time. I'm like, oh, okay, you guys can fix that, right? And so I had to do a CT scan of my brain, or an MRI of my brain. And, fortunately, nothing but brain there. But, the fact that my doctor had to do that, I knew was not a good sign. And, I was pretty good about making sure there were always people with me at appointments, whether it was my husband or my friends. People showed up for that. And the day that I found out how serious it really was a day that I actually went by myself. And the worst possible appointment to have gone to by myself. And I went in, it was the doctor, and he had a fellow with him. And he had to tell me that I had stage 4 cancer, and that metastatic cancer, which means it's spread to far organs, is incurable. And that don't worry. Oh, not don't worry. He never said don't worry. But he said, the good thing is that with treatment options now, we've had really good results for the 4-year survivability. And I'm like, great, because remember, I didn't Google this.
Yes.
So I am going into this blind.
Yep.
So when he says, I have good news about survivability, I think, oh, I'm so relieved. This is so wonderful. Thank God this man is my doctor. And he said, we have an almost 60% 4-year survival rate, slightly lower with mucosal melanoma. And I've never experienced anything like it before since. I literally felt like I was, like a wind had come into the room, like I was being blown over. And he kept talking to me, and I could not understand what he was saying. I understood the words he was saying. I understood it was bad. And I just couldn't understand it. And so at some point I handed him a binder that I was keeping at this point, because I was collecting a lot of paperwork.
Sure.
And I said, here's a blank piece of paper. Write down everything you're saying to me right now. And it was about treatment options and what the options were. And he said, we have two options as far as immunotherapy. And the first option is that we can do 1 dose immunotherapy. And he went through it and he said, low side effects, but slightly lower response rate.
Sure.
We can do combination immunotherapy, significantly stronger side effects, potentially life-threatening side effects, but higher result rate. And I'm like, we're going with number 2, bet max.
Yeah.
And I was all about, we're all in. And I was very clear with him. I said, you're going to pump me full of every drug you can. You're going to radiate me. You're going to cut me up. You're going to do whatever you need to do so I'm around for my kids. And again, I kept putting that picture in front of anybody who treated me because I wanted them to understand that I was going to do anything it took to stick around.
Wow.
That's such a powerful statement. It's interesting because I remember when we went scootering, and I think this was right at the top of your treatment. I'm all about distraction. So we took kids' scooters and went scootering around the neighborhood, picked up lunch, and then had lunch in the park. I remember telling a friend of mine who's a nurse about this because I didn't really understand. I mean, I had listened to you and we had talked and this and that. And I remember at the time him going, that doesn't sound good. And I was like, really? Because you looked like Tracy.
It was the most frustrating thing that I listen to on a daily basis is, you look great, you'd never know.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who really underestimated how much how much was at stake for my health and my life.
Yeah. And I remember, the other thing that I remember taking away from that conversation was the fear that I felt when Eric told me that. And then the second thing was you saying, just be there to distract. Because life at that point was constantly staring at you at every point. I'm sure you look at your own mortality and everything else. And then you learn that, you sometimes need a break from that. But as a mother of 3, that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, no, it was a giant, Times Square moving crawl through my brain at all times. And it was huge. Yeah. If you ever walk by a highway or something, or you happen to be on the side of a highway and you have to pull over for whatever reason, you realize how big those signs really are. That's how big melanoma cancer was through my head at all times. I was constantly distracted by that. It was very, very hard for me to focus on anything because that was all that was going through my head all of the time.
How long does this treatment take? So that we have an understanding and our listeners also have an understanding of what is this timeline? So you had this diagnosis, you have a doctor that's treating you. They give you, what is the timeline of this treatment and this immunotherapy and the aggressive form of that look like? I
was in treatment, I want to say within, and again, there's a whole diagnostic part of this, which was probably 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
But I remember I actually went into treatment the same day that the other hospital was going to see me for the first time. So, I went in, it's a combination immunotherapy. You're supposed to try to get to 4. Now, immunotherapy is basically telling your body, it's taking the blinders off of your immune system and saying, okay, see that right there? That's cancer. Go kill it, because cancer is really smart. And it basically is constantly throwing rocks and going, what was that? To your immune system so that it doesn't attack it and allows it to get in there. And so with combination immunotherapy, I was supposed to do the combo, which is Ipi-Nivo. And I was supposed to try to get to 4. And they said, listen, good chance your thyroid is going to give out on this one. There's a chance that it's going to attack your organs. Sometimes immunotherapy gets confused as to what to attack. You are probably going to have serious digestive issues, and you'll probably get a rash. And so,
all right, okay.
And so, I was supposed to do that every 3 weeks, and they're like, the great thing about this is you can still work and you can still be there and you'll have some pretty nasty side effects and they will progress with time. But the goal is for you to get to 4. If we see that your organs are starting to fail, if we see that your thyroid is starting to fail, we'll reassess. But And again, at that point, I'm like, I don't care what we have to do. You just keep going with this because I'm going to keep going.
What does the 4 mean? Is it 4 weeks?
No, it's a treatment. So every 3 weeks, I had to get a dose once every 3 weeks until we got to 4. So the cycle is 4.
So the 4th, okay.
So the goal was to get to the 4th, and I actually made it to the 4th, and like right off the bat, got a big old rash in like 72 hours, and I tried to ignore it, and it finally occurred to me that was what had gotten me in trouble in the first place. Was ignoring something. So I called my doctor and I said, I have a rash and it's all over my chest and back. And they said, we can prescribe a cream for that. It'll go right away. And it did. It did.
Okay.
And, I had some stomach issues, but again, immunotherapy tends to go from like annoying issues like rashes and body aches and some low fevers, maybe some gastrointestinal distress to organ failure. And there's not that kind of chemo in between. Chemotherapy can be really debilitating. It can potentially kill you. But, there's hair loss, there's huge fatigue. You don't have that kind of in between with immunotherapy.
Okay.
You have either like pretty mild symptoms or organ failure.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, until we get there, I don't care. We're going to keep going. And there was no reason to stop. So I got to 4 treatments. We got my scan results back. And I find out that my lungs are almost entirely clear.
Wow.
My liver tumors have shrunk. I had to Google what the word punctate in size means, but punctate in size means.
Is that the first time you Googled this whole time?
I Googled it like the 6-week mark, trying to basically confirm everything my doctor said, and it was the worst thing I ever could have done because basically I learned that I was going to be dead in 6 to 9 months if treatment didn't work.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah, Google is not the right place
Google
to go.
is not your friend.
Oh, wow.
And that's the advice I would give to anybody who is diagnosed with anything serious is listen to your doctor. Do not.
Or even not diagnosed,
Yeah.
I guess. Stay away from Google.
Stay away from Google. Stay away from the internet. My pediatrician, when we had my daughter, said, the internet is really good for pornography, but not advice. And I've always kind of kept that in mind that A, it was my pediatrician who said that.
Funny.
And B, it's great advice. It really is.
Right.
Because, you don't know what somebody's agenda or headspace or how old that information is. that
Yeah,
they're
for
quoting.
sure.
And
Or the credentials even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not, who they say they are, it might not be who they are. And so, about 6 weeks in, I did Google stage 4 mucosal melanoma, and I found out I was really in far more danger than I realized I was.
So you now go through all of this treatment. You get to this 4th treatment round, which is about 12 weeks in. Mm-hmm. You get through that. You get through the rash, and you're here.
I'm here.
So take us now through if that speed bump, which
so much more happened.
Was more like a mountain range.
The beginning, maybe.
Yeah.
That was actually that was the beginning mountain range because I thought, okay, I'm all better. Great. Go back to my normal life.
Yeah.
I literally remember saying, thinking out loud, I was putting something away in my kid's closet, and I was thinking, did I learn what I needed to learn from this? Mm-hmm. Like this was some great after school special. And I'm like, wow, because I really didn't suffer. I did not have, my thyroid never failed, which they expected to fail. My liver was a little inflamed, but it wasn't that bad. Mm-hmm. Just enough that we had to take a little break from any kind of follow-up treatment. But the idea was this was a light switch and my immune system knew how to fight now. And I thought this, did I learn what I need to learn? And apparently cancer was like, hold my drink. And when we did my next scans, 12 weeks later, everything was back and was triple the size.
What?
Wow.
And that was devastating, not only because it was so unexpected, but nothing really seemed to slow it down for a very long time. And things started to get worse really quickly. And I'm very lucky that my doctor was very aggressive. I'm very lucky that I had the wherewithal to advocate for myself, that I went to other hospitals and learned just how special MSK was by being a part of clinical trials elsewhere. And there was a point where I literally was sitting at my desk. I was looking at a PowerPoint presentation. I put my hand on the side of my neck, and I was looking at what I was doing, and I felt a lump. And at this point, the cancer was in my liver, and it was in my lungs, and it had spread to my lymph nodes, and it was in my breast.
Wow.
And there was a lump by my lymph nodes in my groin, and now there's something in my neck. And I literally pushed away from my desk, and I'm like, I'm not dying here.
Yeah, what am I doing here?
And I that was the point where I'm like, I need to focus on getting better.
Yeah.
And my friend was very helpful in saying, she goes, listen, because I'm like, I'm not doing anything right here. Sorry, I keep hitting that. I'm not doing anything right here. I am, I'm not there enough for my kids. I'm only probably giving 80% at work. I'm not doing what I need to be doing. Mm-hmm. And basically she said, think of your life as 3 balls that you're juggling. Mm-hmm. There's your health, your family, and your work. Which one can you put down? And that was really helpful for me to finally say, I have to step away. I have to get better. Or if I'm not going to get better, I have to give my family the time that
they deserve. Wow. So the mountain range started. Mm-hmm. We just realized that it's much larger than what we thought. It's like the iceberg.
Yeah.
So then what happens?
So I had surgery to remove my lymph node under my arm.
Okay.
And that was right before I was supposed to go to Disney World with my kids.
Okay.
And the surgeon goes, I don't know if we can sign off on you going to Disney World. And I'm like, hey, we're going to Disney. Like, if we're pushing something off, we're pushing off the surgery. I'm not telling 3 kids they're not going to Disney World. And then, finally, my doctor and I said, I'm like, can I go back on the combination immunotherapy? And the answer was basically, no, it's 4. You do 1, 2, 3, 4 ever. Like, it's a lifetime thing.
Oh.
And that's it. You don't go back on. I'm like, why don't we go back on? He said, well, it could cause organ failure. It can cause all these. And I'm like, well, is the cancer definitely going to kill me if it keeps going on this level? And he did a very nice soft shoe tap dance on that one. But basically the answer was yes. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, I'm willing to risk organ failure if we can get this done. Yeah. And so and more power to him, he gave me another 4 doses. Wow. And I went through and things started to slow down. Okay. And then, in the middle of all of this, that's when we found the one in my breast, and, it was still really it was really scary because, again, the CTs and the MRIs are still coming back with tumor growth. And we got to 8. And again, this is like the most anybody has ever gotten is 8 of the combination immunotherapy. And I said, okay, can we keep going? He said, well, I don't know. And let's see what we can do. And a lot of this has to do with your insurance company. Yep. And I said, well, let's keep going. And again, he was willing to do it. He was willing to put in for it. He was willing to go into meetings and say, she's willing to do this. And I was very clear. I'm like, listen, I have been pregnant or nursing for the last 6 years. My body has lived a pretty clean life. Yeah. It's done really amazing things in creating 3 very healthy children. Yep. I am not overweight. I don't have diabetes. I don't have any of these things that would contraindicate you continuing to do this. Sure. Advocate for me. Do this for me. Make this happen. And we got signed off on a 3rd round, which MSK had never done. Wow. And we got it. And it was one of those things where I was starting to feel pretty bad at this point. I was starting to get really, increasingly negative side effects. Sure. And at that point, I had gone to a major cancer hospital in Texas and had a clinical trial done about adaptive cell therapy. Mm-hmm. And I was recovering from surgery. I had just come back, and we sat down with him, and I was tired. And it was one of the few times that I really was visibly ill. Yeah, in front of people. Well, no, I mean, I felt it a lot. Uh-huh. I just didn't let people see it. Sure. And I I was just so tired, and I had like a baseball cap on, which is it was one of my major rules. Like, don't look bad because you don't want the doctor to give up on you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let people give up on you. Look as good as you possibly can because you don't want people to think, oh, she's a lost cause. And I went in, he goes, okay, you got signed off on for 4 more. And so suddenly we're at like dose number 5. And I remember like just being I'm like, this might be too much. And that was the first time I really thought it.
Yeah.
Like we had surgery. I had flown across, half the continent. Sure. That was the first time I thought this might be too much. And we went in to do my sixth round or my sixth treatment. And they said, okay, your liver's starting to go bad.
Yeah.
And if we do this treatment, it will definitely go bad.
Uh-huh.
And they said, we cannot medically advocate for this, but you can override us.
Okay.
And my husband and I had a really tense breakfast about
Sure.
this. And he said, I don't think you should do this. I think, it could be working. The last scans showed that, your lungs were starting to level out and it's not getting any bigger. Let this work. And I said, hey, I'm trying to make this work for, I am fighting for months and weeks and days and hours with our kids. Mm-hmm. So I think we should keep going. And it was a tense, difficult conversation. My best friend from high school happened to be there. Yeah. And he desperately was trying not to be a part of the conversation, was really interested in his oatmeal while we're having this very tense conversation. And I called back and I said, okay, let's do this. And the doctor and the physician's assistant started laughing. And she goes, yeah, Dr. Pasta just put in the order. He figured that's what you were going to say. And wow. You have to understand, these medications are nose-bleedingly expensive, like $62,000 each treatment.
Wow.
So every time I sat in the chair, it was $62,000. And that's before all of the blood draws and all of the other stuff. So the half-life on these are like 4 hours, 4 to 8 hours, depending on the drug. So like they have to know that you're going to sit there and do this before they put the order in, because this is not like, dropping some Tylenol on the floor. This is tens of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. So, I kept going and not surprisingly, I did break my liver at that point. But I said, again, can you bring my liver back?
Yeah.
Because if you can bring my liver back and we start to, and everything else starts to shrink again, or you give me more time, I'm willing to do that.
Sure.
And that's what we did.
What I get out of this is just the human ability to keep fighting and to have basically will. And, I think when I listen to you, as I just listen to this person, and I've always known this about you, is like that you've always had this very strong will to fight and stand up and do the right thing.
Frequently to my detriment, but not in this case.
Yeah, but I mean, it maybe that's what it was. All of that was leading up to this.
Do you feel like maybe there was something else with you? I'm not sure where you lean spiritually, but it sounds like from the very beginning you had this sense of like existentially, like something is wrong, right? And then you had a question about halfway through, which was, I don't know if I've actually learned what I need to learn. And then you had that strength to push through when it looked like most people were telling you should stop. I can't help but think that there's just something else there that's helping to guide you. Do you believe in any of that?
I have a complicated relationship with religion, but I have my children in Catholic school. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot to religion. A lot of people were praying for me. My sorority president, who I had not seen in 25 years, knit me a prayer shawl. A woman who cleans our house sat and prayed with me. And I can't even tell you how powerful it felt. Like my whole body got hot when she and I prayed together. When I was in Houston, we went to a major church, one of those big mega churches. Yeah. We saw Joel Osteen, and he's gotten a lot of flack for the money he takes in. And again, whatever you come down on that one, he said what I needed to hear. And they said, if you have a consideration, please come up and we'll pray with you individually. And I wound up praying with this woman, and same thing, my whole body went hot. My whole body went hot. And she did not pray that I got better. What she prayed for is that I was able to find peace. because there's a level of anxiety that is just really hard to keep up with for a year, which is basically where we were.
Yeah, for sure.
And she prayed for me to have peace. And I think that was really amazing because I did feel peace. I think also part of it is that I had this major tumor in my breast right above my heart, and literally poisoned, hanging over my heart. And those two things came out. The tumor, and we went to this church, and I felt better afterwards. And
Wow.
I'm not going to poo-poo anything. My friend Tandy, who is this amazing fitness professional, she does the whole thing. She does, diet and exercise. She said she was very clear. She's like, you need to do this treatment. I'm not going to be that person who tells you to go take apricot seeds. But let's see if we can change your diet. Let's see if we can do some exercises that will at least reduce the inflammation and let you be on this treatment as long as you can before it flames out. It flames out something major. And she does Reiki, and
Cool.
all of those things made a big difference. And she basically sent me a list of groceries, and she said, if you will buy these, I will come over with my kids and my husband, and we will take over your kitchen for 4 hours, and we'll do a week's worth of food. And she
Wow.
did that every week for 6 weeks.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I think it's not, I think it's not unrelated that spiritually I felt better, that my food changed, that all those things came together at the same time that my doctor was pushing as hard as he could with science. I think that if we just look at it as medication, we're missing something.
So you looked at it literally from 360 degrees, like from every angle possible.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Okay, so now you're in Texas. You're at this mega church. You're feeling worn physically. You've got little things that are happening, whether they be spiritual, whether they be, support networks, etc., that are now helping support you and lift you. What then happens?
Like I said, the cancer was still growing at that point.
Okay.
But
What year is this?
this is 2017.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed in August of 2016. Had great, amazing results November 2016. Okay, we're done. And then we're just going to follow up, make sure it all worked. And that's when things started going downhill.
Okay.
And then around July of 2017, I found that lump in my neck. And that was when I'm like, I'm done. I need to spend some
11
time with my
months,
kid.
Yeah.
And, I went on short-term leave, which turned into long-term leave. My liver started to fail. But in that time, I was really committed to doing as much stuff with my family. Hashtag making memories.
Sure.
And, my husband started joking that I was sending him more Outlook invitations than his job was, because every weekend we were packing it in. We're going to the zoo, we're going to the science center, we're going to the Museum of Natural History, we're going to make art prints, we're going to go to the park, and sometimes 2 and 3 things a day.
Yeah.
And we did that for about 7 weeks, and my daughter finally said, can we not do anything today? Because I'm really tired.
Oh.
And I started realizing they didn't want necessarily all the things that I was trying to plan
Sure.
for them. They just wanted to be with me.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, my liver was very agitated.
Sure.
My liver was in a stage 2/stage 3 event, which is not like a liver heart attack, the equivalent of a heart attack for a liver, but it certainly was not functioning the way it was supposed to.
It wasn't happy.
It was not happy. And I was on medication, and my liver would start to react, and they'd start to dial it back because you can't be on this medication long term, and it would pop back up. And we'd get under control. And the side effects from the steroids I was on to make my liver had horrible side effects. Again, those interim side effects that, again, I was getting either minor side effects, rashes, headaches, digestive issues. These side effects were massive swelling of the head and neck, massive stomach issues, fatigue, insomnia, sweating. My face was literally so swollen I had to stop driving because I lost my peripheral vision. from my eyes being so swollen. I couldn't walk my kids to school. I couldn't pick them up anymore. There was a point where I couldn't walk up and down the stairs, and we live in like a row house, so that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that started to happen. And, my kids were so oblivious to what was going on. I was just mommy.
Yeah.
And there was a point where my husband was traveling that same year, 2017, because there was a major software rollout that I had been a part of for 4 years. And I was so mad that I had been an architect of this. Mm-hmm. And you know how I am.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to see this to fruition.
Yeah.
And my husband was traveling for the vendor that was doing this for the fitness company. And he was gone like 10 days a month.
Wow.
And, a lot of friends stepped up and came and either helped me put the kids to bed or took me to treatments or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, there was one night where nobody could come over, nobody could help. I was so swollen. I felt so awful. At this point, I had gone from being 123 pounds to about 145 pounds.
Wow.
I looked in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
In a very short amount of time. And I had all 3 kids in the bathtub at one time because I couldn't pick them up and put them all in at the same time. Mm-hmm. And they're all splashing and they're fighting, and somebody scratches somebody and somebody starts crying. And I'm like, Mommy is sick. Mommy is so sick. Don't you see how sick Mommy is? And my daughter looked at me and she goes, no, what's wrong with you? And they just had no idea.
Wow.
And it was the only time that I kind of made reference to what was going on to my children. They otherwise had no idea. They knew Mommy went to the doctor a lot. Mm-hmm. They don't know the word cancer necessarily. Sure. They don't know the word melanoma. They don't know that in the abstract sense other than whatever they might have picked up from the universe. But that was the one time where I kind of lost it. And I'm like, can you just give me a break? Come on. Yeah. I know you guys are little, but stop. And, I otherwise you had to muddle through. I had to fight through that. And, fortunately that project finally finished rolling out and my husband was around a lot more.
So this is now 2017. Mm-hmm. What happens in 2018?
So in 2018, I was fine. My liver was finally starting to rebound.
Okay.
Finally. And it was a really long period of time of being on these steroids, which not only have negative physical effects, but have negative mental effects because it's messing with your brain chemistry because it's hormones.
Yeah.
And starting around Christmas time, I started physically feeling better, and I started realizing I got back my October scans, and I had been off treatment, and I was losing my mind because while my liver was inflamed, while my liver was going through this event, I could not be on treatment.
Oh, okay.
And the last time I had been off treatment, everything had tripled in size.
Sure.
And I kept seeing my doctor, and I was more tired, more fatigued, and again, everyone kept saying, oh, you could never tell. You'd never know. You could tell something was seriously wrong with me at this point. You could absolutely tell something was horribly wrong. And in October, we had gotten that my lungs were clear.
Wow.
And so we're moving forward. And then we did another scan 3 months later, and my liver tumors were starting to shrink. And I'm better. And the crazy thing is, I'm finally better. And I start to lose my mind. Completely had an epic PTSD episode and that went on for months, where wow. I was constantly ready for someone to pull the rug out from under me again because that had already happened. Yeah. And the longer I was off treatment, the more scared I was that it was going to come back again.
Sure.
And I would say, I finally was off the steroids at the beginning of December, end of November, beginning of December. Some of the weight was coming off, but apparently when you gain that much weight, you actually have to diet and exercise. And I was so mad about that.
Wait, what? Say that again.
So frustrating.
That's just insult to injury.
It really was. And, I, around January, around my birthday, really started to have panic attacks, which is something I'd never dealt with. I hadn't dealt with it even when I was in the throes of you're going to die cancer.
Wow.
And there was a point, I think it was right before my scans, where it literally curled up on the ball as a ball in our living room or in our dining area, and like basically crawled under our kitchen table and was crying. And my husband pulls up the tablecloth and goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I can't have cancer anymore. I just can't have cancer anymore. I just can't have cancer anymore." And I just kept saying that over and over again. Yeah. And I was a wreck. And, you know, I would say starting at about the halfway point before the next set of scans, I really started to freak out. And like that sign, you know, melanoma cancer is getting bigger, not smaller, even though the tumors are getting smaller. Because it kept, you know, there's such a fundamental shift when your body does this to you. You know, it's not a relationship. It's not a whatever. On a DNA level, your body has betrayed you.
Yeah.
You know, on a cellular level, it tried to kill you.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a hostage situation where, you know, while you're going through it, it's really scary. And then as you're coming out the other side, you can't shake the fear. And it took a lot of working out. I got on a bike. I'd never been a spin person. And I remember going to SoulCycle, and Eddie, wherever you are, thank you so much. And Eddie, I took my first class, and this guy, Eddie, said, you know, aren't we lucky to be here? Aren't we so lucky that our bodies are moving today? Not everyone gets to move their body like this. And, you know, it's a dark room. And that was the first time I cried my way through a SoulCycle class. And I cried my way through dozens more.
Sure.
And that melanoma cancer, like as I'm biking through, as, you know, left foot, right foot, you know, I cried and I cried and I cried, and I got so much of it out. And, you know, I've heard so many personal trainers and fitness people saying, oh, you know, sweat is fat crying. Well, no, actually, sweat is your body shedding the emotion that got you fat.
Yeah.
Okay. And all the fear that was stored in that fat. And, you know, I'd gotten down, I'd lost 10 pounds just being off the steroids, but I still had another 15 pounds to go. And as that weight started to get off, as I had a positive thing to channel my emotion into, I cried through, again, just dozens of classes, but I started to lose the weight. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I started to sweat, and that marquee of melanoma cancer got a little smaller. And it wasn't going through my head all the time. And, you know, I was also in therapy for myself. I was in couples therapy with my husband, because there are so many people who kept saying, oh no, my friend beat stage 4 cancer, and she and her second husband now. And like, it kills marriages.
Yeah.
It kills marriages. That kind of stress
absolutely
destroys relationships. And so I didn't want that to be us. So I was in individual therapy. I was in couples therapy. I was working out whenever I could. I readjusted my food back to what it had been when my friend Tandy was making it for me. I just reassessed, and I was still having panic attacks. I was still having massive panic attacks, but they were becoming fewer in number. And I think we finally had scans in July of 2018 where I was finally willing to believe that maybe, just maybe, the rug wasn't going to come out from under me.
That's such an amazing story.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you realize that so often in what we see in the world, as far as in media, is, and again, is this to your point, it's looking at the full journey and what that journey really looks like, because we generally get to see the beginning, this catalyst, and then the next thing is you see the end, but you don't really get to hear what you've just shared as far as what this entire journey has been like. And this is 2015? No, that's when we...
2018, right?
2016 through... 18. So now we're through 18. So where are you today?
So I'm still being scanned every 3 months.
Okay.
There's still 2 tumors left in my liver.
Okay.
And in February, my doctor said, you know, we want to do a PET scan. And PET scans are great for finding inflammation, which is what cancer is,
Okay.
or at least how it shows up. It's not as good as a CT or an MRI for saying, okay, I see this. It's a murkier looking scan.
Okay.
So that's why they don't like to do them.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, I just want to see if these tumors in your liver are active.
Okay.
And we did the PET scans in February, and they came back PET negative, which means there's no metabolic activity. And I said, so what does this mean? Does this mean that we beat it? Are we done? And he basically said, you want me to say NED. And NED in the cancer world means no evidence of disease. Very few people talk about remission.
Sure.
Outside of 80s movies. But NED is what you're shooting for. You're shooting for NED. And he goes, you want me to say you have NED? And I'm like, yeah, I sure do.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, how about this? You have no metabolic evidence of disease. So let's just boil that down to NED. So technically I still have 2 tumors there, but they are like, volcanoes that are inactive right now. So we still have to monitor them.
Sure.
We still have to make sure they aren't growing again. But there does not appear to be any active cancer in my body right now.
Wow.
That's such an amazing, that must have been amazing to hear.
It was. He told me metastatic cancer, metastatic melanoma is incurable. You're
Wow.
going to die from this. And he didn't say that. He said it in a really nice way. And my doctor is incredibly diplomatic and a very kind man, has amazing bedside manner. But, there's a point where you can't dress it up.
Sure.
And to go from, you're going to die from this to the tumors are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're moving to more places and more places and more places to there's no metabolic evidence that this disease is growing in you anymore was an amazing day.
All because of Soul Cycle.
Yeah.
Quick plug for that, right?
I wrote Melanie Whelan is the CEO, and my daughter has actually met her because of something else. Hopefully that we'll talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
But Melanie, I wrote a long email to Melanie saying, "Listen,
Thank you.
yeah, this had a big impact on my ability to fully come back from this because I'm not the same person that I was, but I'm not losing my mind on a regular basis, which is what was happening for a really long period of time, a good 6 months of not being able to fully function in a place of not being in fear."
I think one of the things that I want to leave with our listeners is that mountain was huge and that mountain range was extensive. Did you ever, I don't think as human beings, and I know for myself during things that have been very, very particularly difficult, that I've believed that I had the internal strength. I remember episodes in my own life where you're underneath a table, just in the fetal position, just why is this happening? And yet at some point, the sun comes up tomorrow, you stand up again, and you have this will that, all right, I have to move forward. I think we've heard a lot, and you've talked a lot about what's happened through these processes. What actually got you through it? Like, what are the things that actually made you stand up again, made you put on your clothes, look forward, and say, all right, one more step, 1% better?
I didn't have another option. I had 3 small children, and one of the most traumatizing things of the diagnosis was the fact that I didn't think my children were going to have any memories of me.
Okay.
Because they are so young. And people say all the time, "Oh, I would have just gone to bed. I wouldn't have gotten out of bed. I would have just given up." And you can't give up. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. You have to pull into that reservoir of strength wherever it is. And around the same time that I found out I had had a reoccurrence, my very good friend's husband had a massive heart attack, was in a vegetative state, and eventually passed a few weeks later. And same thing for her. How people kept saying to her, "I don't know how you get out from under the covers," and the answer is she had 2 small children, and she needed to keep going. And I think the answer is you need to keep going. When it's life or death, you need to keep going. And understand, even from my doctor and other people.
That was the right answer.
Dominus. Yeah, thank you. And I'll take Scary Illnesses for 800, Alex. So, no, I think that I think most people will choose to fight, especially, you know, if you are in your 40s and you have so much to stick around for.
Sure.
I don't buy that. I did talk to, again, my friend who's the midwife at our OBGYN, and she said, you know, your response actually was unusual. There are people who would have just hidden or not gotten treatment right away. You know, you being so aggressive is unusual, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that people wouldn't fight for that. I every so often I'll read something about somebody who's doing some kind of holistic only treatment, or they're going to a meditation workshop, or they're, you know, or they've decided that God will heal them. And I think all of those things can be a part of your treatment, but it can't be the whole thing. And you have to pull from everything. You got to be really greedy and just take all of it and put it on your plate. And I lose my mind when I hear about people who have said, no, I'm going to walk away from, you know, the drug companies are just trying to keep us sick. I lose my mind about that kind of stuff, because my doctor is younger than I am, and he has aged White House years in the last 3 years. Wow. Because there's such a high mortality rate for melanoma.
Yeah.
And he's only seeing the people who are stage 3 and stage 4. So he is seeing people die on the regular. And I just don't buy that my doctor or other doctors are watching this on a daily basis because they want to put money in some drug company's pocket. I think that you have to trust in the science that's out there, and you should, by all means, pray. Ask people to pray for you. You should eat good food. You should, if CBD is going to help you out, go for it. You know, if crystals are going to help you out, go for it. Get your tarot cards read, get some Reiki done, do all of those things. Go to church, but don't abandon the science. And I think that, again, one of the things that's most frustrating to me is when I hear somebody has decided to stop treatment when there are still treatment options in front of them. Again, there is a point where you have to say, I'm done. It's not going to work. You know, there's nothing left to do other than to accept and spend as much time with my family as possible. But I didn't get to that point. And while I still had options, I was going to evoke all of them.
That's amazing. And I think that's the one thing that, you know, is when we start conversations with different people, is every person has a different journey. Everyone, I think, has a different tolerance for how many more steps. When is it going to end? But I think what I find so amazing, and I've always found amazing with you, is your tenacity.
Gets me in trouble a lot.
Yeah, but it saved your life too.
Exactly. And maybe that was all of that tenacity that got you in trouble before was all for this one journey, this one mountain range that said, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. It seems like the truth is that everyone does have that option. Like either you're going to give up or you're going to keep going. And you just view it as there is no option.
There is no option.
Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact that Ridley, King Henry of Cuva, and Harper are tremendously lucky.
Thank you.
Not to mention they are cute. If you guys ever go to her Instagram, or her Facebook, they are the cutest kids ever.
You probably. I actually have a cancer page. WTF. WTF is going on with Tracy's cancer.
I love it.
That's good.
And there are pictures of them on there.
Yes. And they have had a slew of adventures, and through all of this and over the past few years and everything, the things that you've done, because I remember seeing those Disney World. I didn't realize that you had just gone through surgery, but
yeah, I came out of surgery on Thursday, and we got to the airport at 8:00 in the morning on Sunday.
Wow.
Amazing. But I remember seeing those pictures. I am truly inspired just by your tenacity that has gotten you in trouble, but also made you survive and keep flourishing. Do you have anything else that you wanted to ask?
Well, I know that there are a lot of listeners out there that are dealing with, their own journeys, obviously. And is there any advice or anything that you might like to, any kind of strength or hope that you might like to share with our audience in terms of what you learned from your experience?
Other than don't Google it?
Yeah, that's a big one.
That is a huge one, though.
Go to Disney World. Don't Google it.
Don't Google it.
Yes.
I think that there is a big, and we've talked about this, a misconception that people can't do it. You have strength that you have not dipped into yet. And I think that when you face something really terrifying, a cancer diagnosis, a major disease diagnosis, a death in your family, you find that and you realize you have to keep going. And, it's going to do crazy things to your head. You're never going to be the same person that you were the minute before you found out whatever you found out. But that's okay. And I used to say, year 1 was about not dying. Year 2 is about getting better. And year 3, I used to say, is about getting back to normal. And I'm realizing that year 3 is all about realizing there is no normal. There is no normal. Yes, my life imploded in a lot of ways, but it's coming back together in whatever way it was supposed to.
The interesting thing is, when you look back at what your life was and you look at today, what are the biggest things that you see that have changed?
Oh, I'm not working.
Okay.
And that was a huge part of who I was.
I would beg to differ because you are the mother of 3 kids. And
I'm not working outside
busy.
I am not working outside the home. And, there's plenty to say about that, probably off mic. But I always saw myself as a working mom. And I think one of the hardest things about this is looking at in the mirror and not being, not judging myself by my professional accomplishments and, what I did outside the home. And there's a lot of judging that I had no idea I was doing of moms who are not working in a traditional workplace. And there are things that I did, that I still do. I've been taking my daughter on a girl boss tour so she meets female executives so she knows she can be anything. I don't want CEOs to be unicorns to her. I want them to be completely normal so that she knows she can do that. But, I'm not getting on the subway every day to go to the office. And I never pictured a day that I wouldn't be working every single day. I was the person who took a deposition when my son was 6 weeks old. I found a professional nursing top so that I could literally nurse my son and take meetings since I was going to be in the office that day. And I literally took a meeting with Mike Kincaid, who works for me. And I'm like, is this going to freak you out? And he's like, if it doesn't freak you out. And I literally just took my 6-week-old son and put him under the shirt. And, and we met about what had been going on while I had been out. And, that was who I was. I was the person who worked and was a mommy. And suddenly, I was the person who had cancer. And by the way, reprioritize your life and put mommy first. And does that make me a perfect mom now? Does that mean I never yell at my kids or never get irritated or say the wrong thing? Or of course not. Of course not. I'm still a human being. And I see people put things on Instagram or social media and they're like, every second is a gift. And it is. But you know what? When your kid just took a crap in the middle of the Orlando airport and you don't have another pair of pants to put him in, it does not feel like a very good gift.
That is
when
not
the baby
a good
then
gift.
throws up down the back of your shirt 5 minutes later, does not feel like a gift.
Yeah.
But, I think that it allows you to be more of a normal person again. And I think it's really hard to walk around and say, and have that moment of gratitude 24/7.
Sure.
I try really hard and I know that I am grateful for a lot, but I think being grateful for just being alive isn't enough. You have to be able to realistically look at things and be like, nope, you're being a bad kid right now and I need you to stop.
Yeah.
Do not lick the door handle. Don't. Do not bite the dog's tail, please. All of those things are things that, I ask you 6 times to get undressed. What's going to happen on the 7th? You ask me. You tell me.
Yeah.
I think that, I was unaware that this was going to be the person I was going to become. I think that I'm still getting to know this person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I am getting better at forgiving this person for who I was, who I am now, and who I'm turning into be.
Well,
and accepting that.
I want you to know that I loved that person from way back, and I love this person.
Thank you.
So I'm sure that we all have our own, things that we feel like we need forgiveness for. But I'm just telling you, is before, through, after, I've always thought you were an amazing person to begin with.
And that's why we're friends.
There you go.
That's why we love each other.
But okay, on a separate note, I don't know if you may not like this, but tell me about those gorgeous bracelets that you have, because those are new.
These are new.
Because I always know.
Probably
I like to see all of the new things that she has that are, and I'm like a parrot. If it's shiny, I keep staring at it. So
these are actually David Yurman bangle bracelets.
Fun.
And they are.
And they have all different colored stones.
They have all different colors. Purple is my daughter's favorite color, so I have a lot of purple on here. But they're actually, as far as David Yurman goes, probably the least expensive thing you can buy is probably like a $200 pair of earrings, and then it goes up to tens of thousands, and I'm sure you can special collection hundreds of thousands. And I got really weird about buying clothes or like accepting gifts when I was in the middle of the illness. Like it felt like it was really temporary, and that was just really wasteful because my clothes were just going to get thrown out. Mm-hmm. All of this was just going to go away.
Sure.
And so, but jewelry was fine. Jewelry was fine because I could give it to my daughter. So my husband, one by one, these bracelets started appearing. These David Yurman little bangle bracelets. One is a plain one, and one has a gemstone in it. And so
and it's purple.
And it's purple. And then there's another purple one. And then we got one that was turquoise just cause.
Sure.
And this came for birthdays, and this came for Valentine's Days and Mother's Days and things like that.
They're amazing.
Because I got really weird about anything that couldn't be passed down or given to somebody else. And now it's just really pretty jewelry that I get to walk around with. So that I'm not giving up for a while.
Got it. There you go. Excellent. Anything else that you want to go?
No, I mean, I think we heard so much about gratitude.
Yep.
And an inner strength, an appreciation for the good things that you have in your life and the love you have for your children.
Absolutely.
And that journey that we went through today was very powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing it with us both. And I feel honored that you shared it with us. So thank you.
Absolutely. Tracy, thank you so much again. You and I will definitely go scootering again for sure.
I would love that.
With big adult size scooters now.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Excellent. So if you guys liked our podcast, please hit the subscribe button.